On March 24, 2015, Germanwings Flight 9525 took off from Barcelona, carrying 150 souls, students, families, dreamers toward Düsseldorf. It was a routine flight, a short hop over Europe's heart. But in the cockpit a silent decision was brewing, one that would turn a clear spring day into a nightmare. In less than 30 minutes, the Airbus A320 would plunge into the French Alps, leaving no survivors. What drove a young pilot to lock out his captain and send the plane full of lives to its doom? A mechanical failure, a terrorist act, or a darker truth hidden in the mind of one man? On March 24, 2015, the Mediterranean city of Barcelona was bathed in the soft light of early spring. At El Prat Airport, Terminal 2 buzzed with travelers. Among them 144 passengers preparing to board Germanwings Flight 9525. A routine low-cost flight to Düsseldorf, Germany. The aircraft, an Airbus A320, registered as DAYPX, was a 24-year-old workhorse, having logged 58,313 flight hours over 46,748 cycles since its first flight in 1991. Operated by Germanwings, a subsidiary of Lufthansa, the plane was scheduled to depart at 9 am local time for a 1,166-kilometer journey across Spain, France and Germany. The passenger manifest reflected a diverse group: German schoolchildren returning from an exchange program in Linares del Valle, Spanish tourists, business travelers and two opera singers, Oleg Brujak and Maria Redner. The crew of 6 included Captain Patrick Sondenheimer, aged 34 with over 6,000 flight hours, and First Officer Andreas Lubitz, aged 27 with 630 hours on the A320. The cabin crew comprised 4 flight attendants. At 9 am, the Airbus pushed back, taxied to runway 07R and lifted off at 9:11 am, climbing into a clear sky. No one aboard could have imagined the horror awaiting them. Flight 9525 followed airway UN 859, climbing steadily toward its cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. The weather was ideal, scattered clouds over the Pyrenees with visibility exceeding 10 kilometers. Captain Sondenheimer in the left seat monitored the instruments, while Lubitz in the right handled communications with air traffic control. At 9:12 am, Barcelona departure cleared them to 26,000 feet, then handed them off to Marcel control. The cockpit was calm and professional. Lubitz's responses were crisp. Germanwings 9525, climbing flight level 260. By 9:27 am, the Airbus leveled off at 38,000 feet, its twin engines humming at cruise power. The flight plan projected a 90-minute journey with arrival in Düsseldorf at 10:39 am. Sondenheimer engaged the autopilot, setting the navigation to follow waypoints over southern France. The pilots completed their cruise checklist, and the cabin crew began preparing for the beverage service. Passengers settled in, some read, others napped, and the students exchanged photos from their trip. The Alps loomed ahead, their snow-capped peaks glinting below. At 9:30 am, about 20 minutes into the cruise, Sondenheimer decided to step out for a restroom break. A routine action on short flights. He reviewed the instruments with Lubitz, confirming the autopilot settings. "You have control," Sondenheimer said, unbuckling his seatbelt. Lubitz replied, "I have control," his voice steady. Sondenheimer exited the cockpit, closing the reinforced door behind him. The door, a post-9/11 security feature, locked automatically, accessible only by a code or manual override from inside. Alone in the cockpit, Lubitz adjusted his seat. At 9:30 and 55 seconds am, he reached for the flight management system and made a chilling input. He selected 100 feet as the target altitude, far below the safe cruising level. The autopilot acknowledged the command, and the aircraft began a controlled descent at 1,800 feet per minute. The change was subtle, no alarms sounded, as the system assumed the input was intentional. Marcel control, monitoring the radar, didn't immediately notice the deviation, expecting the flight to maintain 38,000 feet until nearing Germany. At 9:31 am, Sondenheimer knocked on the cockpit door, ready to return. "It's me," he said, expecting Lubitz to buzz him in. There was no response. He knocked again, louder, then entered the access code on the keypad. The door remained locked. Lubitz had flipped the manual lock switch to lock, overriding the code. Inside, Lubitz sat motionless, staring at the instruments, his breathing audible on the cockpit voice recorder, but otherwise silent. By 9:33 am, the Airbus had descended to 30,000 feet, and Marcel Control noticed the anomaly. German winds 9525, Marcel, confirm your altitude, the controller radiated. No reply. The controller tried again, urgency creeping into his voice. Lubitz didn't respond. The aircraft continued its steady descent, now at 25,000 feet, tracking toward the rugged terrain of the French Alps. Outside the cockpit, Sondenheimer knocks turned to pounding. Andreas, open the door, he shouted, his voice captured faintly on the cockpit voice recorder. The cabin crew, sensing trouble, joined him, one fetching a service cart to ram the door. Passengers began to stir, confused by the commotion and the noticeable downward tilt. At 9:35 am, the aircraft passed 20,000 feet and the ground proximity warning system activated. Terrain, terrain, pull up, pull up. The alarm blared in the cockpit, but Lubitz remained unresponsive, his breathing steady, almost mechanical. Sondenheimer grabbed the fire axe from the rear cabin, rarely used emergency tool, and hacked at the door, denting the reinforced steel, but failing to breach it. Screams erupted in the cabin as passengers realized the plane was diving toward the mountains. At 9:37 am, flight 9525 was at 15,000 feet, descending at 3,500 feet per minute. The autopilot, still following Lubitz's command, maintained a straight path toward the Massif de Trois-Ivoires, a rocky ridge in the Alpes de Haute province. Marcel Control issued a distress call, alerting French military radar. Two Mirage 2000 jets scrambled from Orange Carrots at airbase, but they were too far to intercept in time. In the cockpit voice recorder recorded Lubitz's breathing, now slightly faster, the only sign of life amid the cacophony of alarms. The enhanced ground proximity warning system screamed, terrain ahead, pull up. The primary flight display showed the ground rushing closer, jagged peaks filling the synthetic vision. Outside, Sondenheimer and flight attendant made a final desperate attempt to break in, their shouts drowned by passengers' cries. At 9:40 am, at 6,947 feet above sea level, flight 9525 slammed into a scree-covered ravine near the village of Prets-Haute-Bleone, 100 kilometers north of Nice. The Airbus struck at 430 knots, about 800 kilometers per hour, disintegrating on impact. The force scattered debris across 2 square kilometers, leaving no piece larger than a car door. All 150 aboard perished instantly, their lives extinguished in a fireball that left only twisted metal and sorrow. By 10 am, French air traffic control declared an emergency. News spread rapidly. Flight 9525 was down with no survivors expected. Rescue teams led by the French gendarmerie reached the remote crash site by helicopter within hours. The terrain was treacherous, steep slopes littered with sharp rocks. Gendarmeries recovered body fragments, luggage and aircraft parts, but identification was daunting. The impact had obliterated most remains. By March 25th, the cockpit voice recorder was found, its casing battered but data intact. The flight data recorder surfaced 2 weeks later on April 2nd, buried in debris. The cockpit voice recorder revealed the chilling truth. Lubitz had deliberately locked the captain out and set the autopilot to crash. The flight data recorder confirmed the descent was programmed, not accidental. Germanwings Flight 9525 wasn't just a crash, it was a betrayal of trust. Andreas Lubitz, entrusted with lives, chose destruction, leaving a scar on aviation history. The reforms it spurred, two-person rules, mental health oversight, have bolstered safety, but the pain endures. In Düsseldorf, a plaque reads, "In memory of those who never arrived." Their story reminds us that technology alone isn't enough. Understanding the human behind the controls is aviation's next frontier.